Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estáis? ¿Cuánto tiempo? Bueno, solo unos días que hemos estado separados. Soy Plácido.Doménech y este es un nuevo Inside X de viernes de xHUB.AI. Sé que me echabais de menos, sé que echabais de menos contenido de xHUB.AI. Hola, muy buenas a todos los que vais entrando. Y después de venir ayer de Madrid, he pensado, bueno, este viernes, ¿qué tema puedo coger que me divierta, que altere a los medievos y que sea atractivo, ¿no? Y bueno, pues vamos a hablar de algo muy delicado, que es la vida. Y vamos a analizar la charla, un TED de Eric Nguyen sobre si la inteligencia artificial puede crear vida de cero, from scratch, lo dejo en inglés. El título del programa es ¿Puede la inteligencia artificial crear vida from scratch? Y luego analizaremos también otra charla de 1 hora, la otra es de 15-20 minutos. Y luego analizaremos otra charla que está relacionada, ¿no? Que habla sobre la vida, bueno, habla de muchas cosas. Si somos los humanos máquinas, software, análisis de la entrevista a David Krakauer, que ya lo hemos tenido en el canal y lo volvemos a tener. Entonces vamos a tener un doble análisis. Vamos a hablar de muchas cosas como siempre, siendo un Inside X, con toda la paciencia y tiempo que necesitemos. Y vamos a hablar principalmente de vida artificial, que es la vida. ¿Puede ayudarnos la inteligencia artificial a recrearla? ¿Qué somos? Temas apasionantes. Ayer estuve en Madrid en una charla en el ICEA, una asociación, bueno, para que no me equivoque, es una asociación que es, proporciona un servicio de estadísticas y estudios para el sector seguros en España. Una ICEA, una empresa muy reputada, una organización, asociación. Y bueno, gracias desde aquí por haberme invitado. Fue una charla, un cierre de evento, un evento muy interesante, donde pude escuchar a mucha gente, donde pude aprender, donde pude palpar sensaciones alrededor de la inteligencia artificial en el sector seguros y otros sectores. Y bueno, fue una charla que duró prácticamente 1 hora, aunque no pude terminar todo lo que tenía preparado, pues bueno, las sensaciones que me han enviado la gente que estuvo allí pues han sido muy positivas, así que me alegro que haya gustado. Seguimos haciendo divulgación y hablando de una manera que muchas veces molesta, pero yo considero que es necesaria. No lo hacemos para molestar, sino para divulgar cosas que no se dicen o se venden de una manera que entendemos que no son así. Hay muy poco pensamiento crítico a la hora de abordar la inteligencia artificial, también muchísimo desconocimiento, también grandes oportunidades. La gente tiene, no sé si miedo, pero también tiene muchísimas ganas, ¿no? de aprender, de afrontar este nuevo reto, esta nueva era, y de encontrar pues fuentes de información que le permitan conocer, mostrar el camino, los caminos, la verdad cada uno que la encuentre en sí mismo. Y bueno, muy interesante, ¿no? En España yo creo que hay una gran labor que hacer. Vamos a intentar también participar desde xHUB.AI, impulsando a las empresas y a sus equipos, a las personas, a ser protagonista en esta nueva era y no desde el miedo. Ayer mi amigo José Musach estuvo en una presentación, en un evento donde se suponía que, aquí en España, en Madrid, que se suponía que tenía que estar Geoffrey Hinton, lo anunciaron. Un evento con Geoffrey Hinton en España. Y bueno, Geoffrey Hinton no apareció de forma virtual, ¿no? A través de Zoom o la tecnología que sea. Pero lo sorprendente de esto no fue eso, sino que había un grupo allí, en ese evento, anti-inteligencia artificial. Sí, sí, como lo oís. Allí había un grupo donde lo que defendían era que se parara la inteligencia artificial. Pause AI. El riesgo existencial, el impacto social, no hay marcha atrás, necesitamos tiempo. Bueno, me parece panfletos medievales, ¿no? Panfletos medievales, panfletos de monos gritando. Bueno, el mono se refiere, no es algo despectivo, es para mí un estado primitivo de conciencia. Luego recibo, yo creo que ante el éxito de xHUB.AI y de estar haciendo ese trabajo de divulgación de tiempo, pues algunos medievos están alteraditos. Vamos a ver, en xHUB.AI la comunidad y los espacios en los que yo participo, siempre habrá, y si no hay, no estaré, en los que voy, en los que creo, espacios de libertad de expresión. xHUB.AI nace para dar visibilidad a muchas personas, mucho talento, muchas opiniones, alineadas o contrarias. Lo importante también es ese espacio de pensamiento crítico y la posibilidad también de poder pues debatir y bueno, generar charlas más que entrevistas, ¿no? Se me ha criticado mucho que si interrumpo, que si participo, y es que no son entrevistas, yo no estoy aquí para hacer entrevistas a nadie. Son charlas de personas que conocemos el mundo de la inteligencia artificial o de forma transversal otras cosas y queremos poder debatir, hablar, exponer lo que sabemos, lo que no, opinión, fe, conocimiento o lo que creamos que es conocimiento, lo que sabemos, lo que no. Bueno, aprendemos o enseñamos, no lo sé. Pero esa libertad siempre va a existir. Nadie me la va a coartar, ni a mí ni a nadie que venga aquí. Me da igual lo que se diga, lo nerviosos que se pongan algunos. Vamos a hablar de lo que nos dé la gana. Y a quien no le guste, pues que se pique. No, que se pique, no, que si le pica, que se rasque. Eso. Que se rasque. Si le pica. Nos da igual. Me da igual. Y a xHUB.AI hay cola. Esta semana ya visteis que, bueno, ya advertí que no, que, bueno, por temas de estar totalmente desbordado, pues estaba complicado, ¿no? Pero la semana que viene y la otra vamos a tener, bueno, casi, no sé si 2 o 3 X-Talks. Bueno, hay una cola de gente que quiere venir, gente que se autoinvita, gente que viene porque le invitamos, hay de todo. Nosotros desde xHUB.AI siempre el máximo respeto a todas las personas, todas las opiniones, pero también hay límites, ¿no? En determinadas cosas. Quien no esté dispuesto a dialogar de tú a tú, no hace falta que venga. Se puede ahorrar la visita. Da igual que sea Geoffrey Hinton o no sé, alguien que está empezando, que hemos traído mucha gente de todos los perfiles. Es decir, que hay gente muy interesante y está empezando, jóvenes, mayores, de todo tipo. Por cierto, tenemos una charla con Manuel Alfonseca, que ese es el ejemplo. Yo lo pongo de ejemplo. Si pudiera, bueno, se lo puedo proponer, pero no creo que acepte, sería uno de los primeros en hacerle la entrevista in situ. Pero será muy complicado, no sé, que fuéramos a su casa. Es otra opción, no lo sé. Yo soy muy fan de Manuel. Y discrepamos cosas. y he disfrutado con él en ese sentido. Y yo entiendo que conmigo, porque va a ser la tercera vez. Siempre me ha dicho cuando quieras. Es que no sé si lo que pretendemos solamente es una entrevista de complacencia o de confirmación, pues bueno, quizá este no es el espacio. Advierto a posibles navegantes. A ver qué pasa aquí. A ver un momentín que se refresque esto. Bueno, vamos al lío, no nos metamos en que sé que también... vamos al lío. Bueno, buenas tardes aquí por la gente que está. Bueno, sobre este programa de vida artificial, casi que diría que es como una pequeña continuación o una continuación de programas que hemos venido haciendo, como el de Mustafa Suleyman, Inteligencia Artificial para Personas, no para ser una persona, y el de IA con alma, Ilusión o Reto, donde hicimos un análisis de una entrevista a Blake Lemon y por otro lado otra lectura de un post que hizo xHUB.AI, uno de los padres de la inteligencia artificial, Ilusiones de la conciencia con inteligencia artificial. ¿De acuerdo? El xHUB.AI con Mustafa Suleyman se pueden coger de la mano con sus planteamientos bueno, me ahorro las palabras porque ahí tenéis los programas, ¿no? Vamos a ahorrarnos tiempo, pero vosotros mismos. Y luego hicimos otro programa que también me gustó mucho, Construyendo Androides, nueva especie. Y bueno, fue muy interesante porque ahí pusimos también una entrevista a Moravec. Os recomendaría este programa solo por la entrevista a Moravec que pusimos al principio y luego hay una entrevista a Danis Radhakrishnan, que es el CEO de Clone Robotics, y que bueno, en conjunto el programa está bastante bien con todo lo que hicimos. En definitiva, estuvimos hablando de vidas artificiales, de alma, de nueva especie, gente que está trabajando en ello, analizándolo, criticándolo. Bueno, en definitiva, siempre vemos los diferentes lados o aristas de algo, y yo mismo hago esas reflexiones con vosotros o con la gente que venga. Y se puede ser más dogmático o más contundente o como queráis, pero bueno, nunca es nada personal, y quien se sienta ofendido porque alguien piense contrario, pues no lo sé, mientras no haya evidentemente, bueno, es que nunca es nada personal, entonces bueno, pues que se lo hagan mirar. Nada va a cambiar. Entonces, bueno, pues lo vimos. Y aquí pongo una slide de, bueno, que puede ser introductoria a lo que vamos a ver y hablar. Caminarán entre nosotros y heredarán la tierra, refiriéndose a los robots, decía Marvin Minsky. Pero serán nuestros hijos. Y aquí hemos puesto una imagen de Westworld, donde, bueno, voy a hacer un spoiler, el que se ve no es un humano, es también un androide, ve caminar delante suyo a otro androide, ¿no? Muy parecido al de Corp Robotics. Bueno, dirige y presenta a vuestro amigo, de eso va a ir el programa, una breve introducción, vamos a decir 4 cositas y empezamos con el programa. Dirige y presenta el programa Plácido Doménech. Este es un programa de la comunidad de Inteligencia Artificial y Ciencias transversales de habla hispana, xHUB.AI, 5º año, 5ª temporada. Está transmitiéndose por X, por YouTube, por LinkedIn, por Rumble, por Kik, por Twitch. Y si os gusta lo que veis, pues poned me gusta, compartid, comentad, suscribíos, ya sea por por el canal de YouTube, que es el medio principal, o por cualquier plataforma de podcast, la que sea favorita vuestra, principalmente iVoox, del que estamos totalmente, han hecho lo que han querido con el podcast. Yo no sé si, evidentemente, no intencionadamente, lo entiendo, pero vamos, la locura en que han convertido un podcast que es referencia, y que bueno, ya veremos cuando contestan al caos que han realizado en el podcast, una auténtica locura. Así que los que estéis escuchándolo desde iVoox, pues perdonar las molestias de lo que ha ocurrido. Entiendo que nos lo solucionarán lo antes posible. Podéis seguir escuchando el podcast desde allí, pero bueno, casi que os recomendaría que lo escucharais desde Spotify o otras plataformas. Está en prácticamente todas. En Apple Podcast, en la que queráis. Y si queréis uniros al Discord de la comunidad de xHUB.AI, nos enviáis un mensaje directo o un correo a través de redes sociales. Os pasamos el enlace y entráis. Vamos para 600 miembros. A ver si para final de año conseguimos llegar a los 700. Una comunidad que no para de crecer, referencia en el sector de inteligencia artificial. Y si os ha gustado lo que habéis visto, pues podéis apoyar también económicamente a través de Buy Me a Coffee o a través de PayPal o a través de YouTube Super Chat. Así que bueno, lo dicho. Y aquí dos cositas que bueno, este fin de semana que ya he llegado y he aterrizado, a ver si por fin las abordo. Y es el tercer programa de Selfish Ledger, un clásico que se hace de rogar, ya lo sé, desde antes del verano que estoy anunciándolo. Y este sí que va a llegar ya pronto, que es el del kit de Agentic AI, de agentes, toda una recopilación de un montón de información, PDFs sobre Agentic AI, sobre Gen AI, sobre inteligencia artificial, empresa, etcétera. Es un recopilatorio de PDFs, pero va a estar bastante curioso por la cantidad de información, mucha de ella publicada en el Discord. Y bueno, vamos a analizar, a ver la primera charla y luego la segunda, pero bueno, vamos a analizar la primera. Vamos a dejarme un segundín que busque el vídeo, lo tenía por aquí, y empezamos a ver la primera charla. Vamos ahí. Esperemos que haya suerte con las traducciones, subtítulos, español, vamos a ver. Un segundín.
I've always found it curious how biologists study life. There's this saying, a biologist will learn how a car works by poking at it, removing one part at a time, and seeing how it affects the rest of the car. On the other hand, an engineer will learn how a car works by taking it completely apart and rebuilding it. Take, for example, the Human Genome Project, one of the biggest breakthroughs of the last century. We spent over a decade mapping out all 3 billion letters of our genome, the complete set of DNA. We thought that once we could read DNA and apply that same principle, poking and dissecting one letter at a time, that we can start eradicating all human diseases. But instead, we began to realize just how little we actually understood about the true function of DNA. As a researcher, I work on artificial intelligence, and trained as an engineer. I learn by building things and understand by creating. Today, I want to share an idea that can fundamentally change how we study biology and life itself. Instead of just reading and dissecting DNA, we should be generating it. And we can do this by treating DNA as a language, one that AI can learn to read, write, and ultimately build. This idea led myself and a team of researchers at Stanford and the Arc Institute with a sort of moonshot. Can we generate an entire genome from scratch using AI? Build life from the ground up? Now, I understand the thought of feeding the code of life into a generative AI is both thrilling and perhaps unsettling. But I came to realize that if this was possible, it could unlock some of the most powerful breakthroughs in science and medicine. But I'll be honest, we had no idea if AI could actually generate DNA. In many ways, DNA is like a language. It has grammar structure, sort of like sentences and paragraphs that group together to form a story. And these stories are passed down through evolution, generation by generation. For humans, it's been hard to comprehend these stories written in DNA, in large part because of its scale. DNA is extremely long, and yet at the same time sensitive to the smallest mistakes. Imagine trying to write something the length of 30,000 books in a foreign language, and that when you're off by a single letter, one of billions, this can mean the difference between a healthy person and a person with a life-threatening disease. And so, to tackle these challenges, together with my colleague, Michael Pauly, we developed an AI that could generate extremely long sequences of DNA, 500 times longer than previous AI models, at high levels of detail. We assembled a team of scientists and AI experts and gathered the largest collection of DNA used to train AI, 80,000 whole genomes fed into a model that we called Evo. And our goal was to create something like a ChatGPT for DNA, where you can prompt Evo and describe the DNA you want, and it would generate new sequences, one letter at a time. But there is one key difference. With chatbots, you can just read what it writes, and you can decide if it makes sense to you. With DNA, it's not so simple. It's not an intuitive human language. How do you know if it's any real or good? What does that even mean? What we needed was a test, a way to verify that what it wrote would actually function. And so we started with a familiar tool in biology called CRISPR. CRISPR is like a pair of molecular scissors that can edit DNA, used for things like gene therapy. We asked Evo to make its own and generate its own version of CRISPR from scratch, which had never been done before. It's got proteins and RNA inside. It's a complex system. And so our biologists would take that generated DNA and analyze it to see how realistic does it look? Does it resemble something in nature? How do its proteins fold? Which all give us a sense of its function. But ultimately, we have to test their ability to cut DNA by actually building them in the lab. And so that's what we did. Now, waiting for lab results can sometimes be a nerve-wracking experience. Honestly, it's kind of like waiting for the results of a pregnancy test. You're excited, anxious, and hopeful for a positive outcome. And then all of a sudden, these two little lines appear. Just to be crystal clear, these two lines are a good thing. That's what we want. It means that our CRISPRs cut a single strand of DNA into two in the exact right spot, just like natural CRISPRs in the lab. And so that's when we knew it worked. Thank you. What you're seeing here is the world's first CRISPR system designed entirely by AI. Evo generated DNA that not only looked realistic, but that actually functioned. And so next we decided to go for that moonshot, to try and generate a whole genome from scratch. And Evo was able to generate hundreds of synthetic proteins in a genome that resembled those in nature. But ultimately, it was missing a few parts. It wasn't yet complete, more like a rough sketch of the genome. However, this is just the first version. That rough sketch of the genome will become more detailed over time. In fact, within years, we anticipate AI will be able to generate whole functional genomes. In other words, AI will be able to generate new life. As this technology improves, biology will shift from discovery to design. What might this world look like? Let's look ahead. In this future, we can make truly personalized medicine Imagine prompting an AI like Evo with your genome, finding sources of diseases, predicting your reaction to drugs, and guiding treatment options based on your own DNA. But why even take medicine when you might have a permanent cure? We might choose to alter our DNA outright. And we are beginning to see this today. Recently, the FDA approved the first gene therapy for sickle cell disease, a painful, lifelong condition of the blood. And it works by just changing a single gene in a person's DNA to permanently cure the patient. And now, there are over 500 DNA-altering treatments awaiting approval. But let's say you're not comfortable with changing your DNA. What if we added new DNA? All of our DNA is organized into 23 pairs of chromosomes, chapters, if you will, in the book that is our genome. What if Evo learned to generate a 24th chapter, a whole new chromosome equipped with all the machinery needed to fight hundreds of diseases on demand? With DNA generation, what is the limit of what's possible? We've all seen Jurassic Park. We all thought it was science fiction, and it is. Mostly. Researchers are now reconstructing the genomes of extinct species, with one company planning to resurrect the woolly mammoth by as early as 2028. Now, instead of bringing back extinct species, can we create new ones? Researchers are now engineering microbes for colonizing Mars. If we one day wish to be a multiplanetary species, we'd have to figure out how to grow things on Mars, make it more hospitable, and possibly terraform. And it is possible. We have microbes on Earth that can handle a range of extreme conditions that we call extremophiles. Now, I understand some of these things might sound scary. One of the biggest concerns is biosecurity, the potential to create bioweapons. Can AI be used to generate more infectious viruses? Yes. But AI can also defend and monitor against these threats as well. And so perhaps you feel like me, in that you have to choose between advocating for innovation versus safety. I'd encourage you to embrace both, because stopping progress entirely, I don't think is practical. We need to evolve with the technology, monitor its capabilities, and constantly be asking ourselves, what possible futures are we enabling? As humans, we've always sought to understand the world around us. That is in our nature. But understanding alone has rarely been enough. For centuries, we've studied life by observing and dissecting it. But now, we're no longer just reading life's code. We now have the power to generate it. And with AI, we're at the beginning of unlocking new medicines, science, and even entire new forms of life. Do we make small edits? Do we write entirely new chapters? Or do we one day design life itself? Because to truly understand biology, we must create it. And the future of life is ours to build. Thank you.
Bueno, pues me ha parecido... A ver, un segundín. Me ha parecido una charla apasionante, ¿no? Yo creo que... Bueno, quien plantea cosas muy, muy disruptivas, ¿no? El ADN, no solo leerlo, sino generarlo, ¿no? La manipulación genética, en definitiva. No solo generar ADN, bueno, en definitiva, la búsqueda de generar vida, que puede dar mucho miedo esa idea, pero como comentan aquí, no es que sea posible, sino que va a ser stream una Bible. ¿Pero por qué? Madre mía, de verdad que nos tumban el canal. Nos tumban el canal. Madre mía, stream una Bible. Nos hacen un strike, chicos, fijo. Yo no lo entiendo esto de YouTube. Entonces. Un segundín que no, me parece increíble. Me parece increíble. Me parece increíble que nos vuelvan a tumbar un directo. Me parece increíble. No sé. Se tumba, no se puede mostrar. Pues nada. Streaming una Bible. Pues nada, chicos, tenéis que verlo en de seguro el algoritmo haciendo de las suyas. Ya veo, ya. Bueno, pues el problema es que si nos tumban este tipo de vídeos, pues nada. Si nos tumban este tipo de vídeos, pues nada, no los podremos hacer. Danos la URL, Plácido. ¿Qué queréis la URL? Esperad que me la pide. Vamos a dar la de LinkedIn, la de X. Bueno, un segundo. Que me parece muy fuerte. Me parece muy fuerte. Es la leche esto, macho. Es la leche. Ahí tenéis la de LinkedIn. Y os voy a pasar la de X, la de Twitch. Qué fuerte. Me parece una cosa tremenda ya. Bueno, ahí lo tenéis. Quizás en TikTok nos bloquean también. Bueno, lo dicho, la generación de ADN, vida, evolución. Bueno, evidentemente aquí entra una parte que además me dan más ganas de hacer este fin de semana, el de Selfish Ledger, porque tiene que ver mucho con el tema de la evolución, ¿no? Y este modelo Evo, hicimos un vídeo, para quien no lo haya visto, os lo voy a poner aquí. Ahora lo voy a poner, a ver un segundo, Evo 2, xHUB.AI, espera. Es el modelo Evo 2, ¿vale? Les voy a poner el link, bueno, voy a compartir la pantalla para que lo veáis. Bueno, aquí tenéis el vídeo de biología Evo 2, el lenguaje de la vida, ¿vale? Hice ya un vídeo hace 6 meses y es interesante, ¿vale?
Si quieres crear una app, pero no tienes ni idea de programación ni por dónde empezar, échale un vistazo.
Lo del Grok, si no, ahora lo veremos. Vale, aquí veis esas células de terror me decepcionó bastante. Vale, os lo digo porque os recomiendo ese vídeo. Bueno, vamos a seguir analizando lo que dice. Entonces, todo el tema de la evolución, el hombre va a ser partícipe de su evolución dirigida. Eso es algo que ya hemos comentado muchas veces y que la robótica y la biología van a integrarse. No vamos a distinguir entre crear seres vivos y crear robots. Pero habrá una fusión, ya lo decía Isaac Asimov, ¿no? Los humanos parecerán cada vez más robots, los robots cada vez más humanos y al final seguramente iremos hacia una hibridación o nuevas especie. Habla de técnicas CRISPR, habla de cómo cogen un trozo y lo replican o lo modifican. Eso es lo que se ha estado haciendo y que funcionaba, pero ahora lo que quieren es generar y parece que sí que Kik no hay restricciones ya. Sí, en Kik lo podéis ver. Pero vamos, no sé, hemos analizado a veces vídeos de TED y en tiempo real, bueno, pues nada, yo sé, es que si nos hacen un strike, pues el primer aviso creo es una semana sin hacer contenidos. Bueno, no emitiríamos por YouTube. Al final no vivimos de los followers. Lo podríais ver en otro canal y está. Haríamos el contenido igual. Habla de que Evo lo que quieren hacer es no una modificación del ADN, sino que quieren al final hacer es el genoma completo, ¿de acuerdo? De cero. Con lo que la IA podría generar vida. Nada ni así. No, Johannes Kepler, no, nada ni así te refieres a que no lo puedes ver en X, sí que estaba transmitiéndose, y en LinkedIn y en Kik, ¿no? En YouTube no lo sé. Pero bueno, en YouTube creo que sí que ya se podía ver. En YouTube yo creo que se puede ver. Sí, en YouTube se puede ver. Pero bueno. Hablan de pasar del descubrimiento al diseño y ir a una era de humanos por diseño. Yo sé que eso sonará antihumanista, pero va a formar parte de nuestra evolución. Se puede dar el enfoque positivo. Vamos a evolucionar de forma dirigida. Si se plantean retos como ir a otros planetas, va a ser necesario. Claro, algunas personas que yo llamo medievos, pero que nadie se me ofenda, no es un insulto, ellos me pueden llamar, yo qué sé, lo que quieran, claro. Lo verán como una aberración. Bueno, ¿quién dice que es una aberración o no? Está claro que hay límites, ¿no? Pero nuestra propia evolución hace que dejemos de ser humanos por, bueno, quizá llevar gafas también o utilizar un móvil. Habla de también la aplicación de todos estos descubrimientos en el descubrimiento de curas, bueno, todo el enfoque de enfermedades, en salud, en definitiva, ¿no? Habla también de esa posibilidad de crear un nuevo ADN, un nuevo par, no 23, sino el 24 sería, ¿no? ¿Qué saldría de ahí, no? Y habla que en 2028 van a resucitar mamuts, y ya lo tienen confirmado. Es decir, Jurassic Park deja de ser ciencia ficción, y que lo que vamos a ir realmente no es a resucitar especies extinguidas, sino lo que vamos es a crear nuevas especies. Y que esto en definitiva nos lleva a diseñar la evolución, diseñar la vida, construir la vida como si fuéramos dioses, y esto nos lleva a The Selfish Ledger, que tenéis que ver el episodio 1 y el 2 y a ver si hago el 3, que creo que os va a encantar. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? Que la inteligencia artificial, gracias a ella, vamos a poder crear vida desde cero. Al final de este programa os voy a poner un programa que vamos a hacer, que sé que es muy esperado y muy polémico. Vamos a ver si encontramos gente que podamos traer y que esté abierta al debate. Van a venir aquí a soltar LinkedIn y no me deja entrar. Si se puede, lamentable, LinkedIn no me deja entrar. Qué cosa más rara. X sí, entiendo. Bueno, me ha parecido muy interesante. Al final aquí lo que se va a reflejar es algo que venimos diciendo. Biotecnología, evolución dirigida, humano X, nueva humanidad, nuevas especie. Vamos a ser dioses creando vida, diseñando vida. ¿Dónde están los límites? Bueno, los límites será no los límites, sino la historia que queramos contar. Serán los límites. Serán los límites. Entonces, alguien que vea esto, bueno, pues directamente, bueno, cuando tú analizas esta charla, que ya hicimos un programa que es muy interesante, tenéis que verlo porque había muchas cosas allí. Cuando ves esta charla junto con el programa, que tenéis que verlo si os ha interesado, os ha gustado lo que acabáis de escuchar, y lo trasladas a una conversación normal con gente, pues la gente se vuelve loca, te tilda de, yo qué sé, de friki, de loco, Vivimos una época en que el que intenta informarse o conocer cosas nuevas o ir un poco más allá, pero bueno, desde el respeto, de ver algo de la parte contraria, sacar sus propias conclusiones, bueno, le falta que apedrearlo o quemarlo en la hoguera, ¿no? Y casi que avanzar en esa línea obliga o hace que muchos se sientan ofendidos, caminar en ese camino, ¿no? Pero bueno, entonces parece que si sale alguien que emplea una narrativa bastante limpia, pero que esconde lo mismo, que es los términos que he empleado yo, que es, bueno, evidentemente evolución dirigida, diseño humano, etcétera, pues nos puede llevar a conceptos aberrantes en la historia de la humanidad. Pero bueno, yo lo llamaría una simbiosis, dice Johannes Kepler, que dice cosas interesantes. Yo lo llamaría una simbiosis de sistemas. Muy a lo cibernética, ¿no? ¿En X no sale? No me lo puedo creer. ¿Por qué? ¿En X no lo veis? A ver, en X sí que se estaba viendo. Esperad un momento que lo compruebe, que me voy a volver loco con esto. Un segundo, porque no me creo yo que no esté transmitiéndose esto. Sí, en X está transmitiéndose. Sí. Yo sí que lo veo. Vale, vamos a ir a la siguiente charla que tiene que ver con esto. Tocan más cosas y es un poquito más larga, dura 1 hora. Creo que lo que voy a hacer es, como es bastante larga, pues no esperar la hora entera hasta luego decir cosas, sino voy a ir intercalando cosas. La charla es en inglés, subtitulada en español, si funcionan los subtítulos en español. Sé que los que oís el podcast, pues preferiríais que fuera todo en español, pero va a ser que no, porque se pierde mucho la esencia, las voces, lo que se dice. Yo lo siento, pero va a ser en inglés. Vamos a buscar el vídeo y esperemos que YouTube no nos tumbe, porque habla de evolución, de si somos máquinas. Esto le gustaría a mucha gente, este debate.
If there's danger, we escape it.
Un segundo. Pista de audio tal. Un segundo, que subtítulos español. A ver, esto no va.
Or fight it. And so the brain is doing its thing.
Nada, chicos.
And any creature has...
Vale, sí que va.
So the first thing I would say is that AIs have no intelligence, but they have tons of capability. And the problem with a lot of AI at the moment is it's basically fake intelligence.
It's very quick lookup. It's really just...
It's essentially a really clever lookup. What is intelligence? Intelligence is basically someone or something that makes a hard problem easy. If you went to school and you're sitting down trying to work out a problem, you look over at the person next to you, and they've made a problem look effortless, you'd say, oh my God, that's pretty intelligent.
No. You're the intelligent one looking over the shoulder.
Right.
Because you got the answer easier than they did.
Yeah.
Star Talk.
This is Star Talk Special Edition, which means I got Gary O'Reilly sitting right next to me.
Hi, Neil.
Gary, former soccer pro.
Yes.
Chuck Nice. Good to have you, man.
Who knows nothing about soccer? Nothing.
That's because you're American.
That's right. American, baby.
So, you guys always come up with fun topics. And today is no exception.
Yeah.
It's complexity.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Complexity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm
Please
amazed
simplify.
this is our first time we've ever handled this subject.
It's been one we've been waiting to find the right guest to enter the arena.
Okay.
And guess what? We have.
We have, okay. All right, take us there.
Let me frame it this way. As we come to grips with the reality of the lives we live, I ask myself, is there anyone out there considering the complexity of everything? Right? Asking the big questions. How did intelligence evolve in the universe? Does intelligence have limits? How do ideas evolve? Are there laws of life? And then here the biggie, what is life?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So happy to say there isn't just one individual, but an institution that's set to these tasks. Neil, if you would kindly introduce our guest.
I would be delighted to. We've got with us David Krakauer. David, welcome to Star Talk.
Fantastic to be with you.
Yeah, and you are president of the Santa Fe Institute in New Mexico. This is a world-famous place where deep thinkers go. And the question is...
And die.
That's what, do they ever come out, is the question. So you are the William H. Miller Professor of Complex Systems. I'm impressed that that's even a title you can have.
That's a great, yes.
Professor of Complex Systems.
Imagine how big his door is just to get that name on there.
I want to be Professor of Simple Systems.
Well, there are those.
What else? You have a background in evolutionary theory, good, with also a background in computer science and math. So it sounds like you got just the right pedigree for this. And I think if we have time, we'll get to that you're founder of the Interplanetary Project at the Santa Fe Institute. I only just now first heard of that, but we want to get to the bottom of that as well. So let me just lead off here. We've had a couple of guests on our show who have either spent time at the Santa Fe Institute or were on the faculty there, if that's the right way to say it. Can you just remind everybody what the mission statement is of the Santa Fe Institute and what distinguishes it from any other place that believes they're having deep thoughts about the world?
And can you simplify that into one sentence?
Yes.
No, he's a complexity professor.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you the mission, which is one sentence. It won't help, but it's searching for order in the complexity of evolving worlds. That's the mission statement. And I guess this whole conversation is, what does that even mean?
Which has its own bias, because you're presuming there is order within the complexity to begin with.
Absolutely. I assume the fact that we're here having this conversation is some kind of evidence of that fact.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so essentially the Institute was founded in 1984 in the mountains of New Mexico. There's a reason we're here, because of Los Alamos, and we can discuss that history because it's sort of interesting, actually. I think of us as the sort of more generative, optimistic, fissile material in this part of the landscape.
Just to remind people, Los Alamos, I mean, it's a national lab,
Right.
Okay, and where nuclear reserves are kept and managed and overseen.
Okay.
Very important place. And it's not an accident that it's in the middle of freaking nowhere.
Right.
Okay, you're not going to put that in a city.
Just in case of an accident, it's in the middle of freaking nowhere.
Okay, so you have sort of genetic history, overlapping history with Los Alamos.
Los Alamos, absolutely. In fact, it's sort of interesting that there's an interesting cultural history here. The founding president, George Cowan, he was a child prodigy, and he had worked very early with two people from your world. He'd worked with Eugene Wigner, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on symmetries applied to physics, and with Enrico Fermi. And
famous for the
very
Fermi
young,
paradox and among other things. Yes.
and among many other things. And so he then became eventually the director of research at Los Alamos. In the 1950s, he was asked to give a talk at the Aspen Institute, which is kind of just down the road in Colorado. And he gave a talk on social entropy. Right? So the notion of entropy we're familiar with, from physics, that systems tend towards disorder. And he thought, well, maybe that's true of society. He gives the talk and he flames out. No one understood what he was talking about. Is this a metaphor? Do you actually have something in mind mathematically? That was in the early 50s. 30 years elapsed and you're thinking there's something wrong with the world, where the social sciences and the natural sciences, the mathematical sciences are not communicating as they should be. And that's really the origin story. In the 80s, a group of rather illustrious people came together, several Nobel laureates, said, what would it take to build an institute where we don't start with the divisions of departments and the divisions of knowledge, but we actually just kind of short circuit them and have people compressed in a very high density in one place in the high desert. And that's sort of the premise.
I'm interested. Interplanetary project.
What is that?
There's an itch that needs scratching right now.
Right
Please.
there. Yes.
Okay. So given our perspective on how the world works, how the universe works, our belief, right, that life is probably universal. There's no evidence, but I think it's a reasonable assumption to make.
Right.
What would it mean to have a theory of the universe or a festival of the universe that included not just physics, but economics and sociology and poetry and art and music, right? In other words, astrobiology, as Neil well knows, is dominated by physics. But if it's true, right, that there's life elsewhere, there might be extraordinary sport, extraordinary music to be discovered on other planets. So we wanted to expand the range of thinking about life in the universe to encompass all disciplines. And that's the kind of spirit of SFI.
But are these really disciplines that are created by life, or are they our perception of our preeminence in life?
Yeah, that's a really deep question that relates
so
to this
deep, I didn't
concept of-
understand it.
Really?
No. I mean,
So here's what I'm
if you
saying.
if you find aliens and they play music, is that what you're saying, or what?
Yeah, my point is this: we think that would happen because we do it.
Oh, okay.
You understand?
So that's an interesting bias.
We have a perception of preemprecedence
Okay.
in the universe itself, and so
Even in the movie,
why would we make the supposition that
Close
those things
Encounters of the
exist?
Third Kind,
Right.
They played musical
played
notes
music back to us.
each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Look at our other bias. Let me just turn this around on you a bit, which is that everyone would say, look, maybe chemistry is universal, right? So we're going to find DNA or RNA. That's universal. But mathematics, well, we could describe things mathematically, but is mathematics can be universal? Is music? I mean, what is the, if you like, set of beliefs we have that make the most fundamental constituents universal and everything else somehow anthropomorphic?
So these
And I would like to question that premise.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And
I'm down with that.
and that flows in and through your thinking about an interplanetary project. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
and in
Got it.
fact, the slogan of the Interplanetary Project was changing the world one planet at a time.
That's actually
All
very
right,
good.
I think, right, you guys want to change this world. I don't want to particularly change others. And the question is, could a more expansive, humanistic, decent perspective on things allow us to make progress on this planet?
Well, we
That's
did discover a planet that's completely inhabited by robots. It's called Mars.
Oh, how long have you been sat on that joke?
waiting to put it in out there. So now we got the institute understood. Now tell us about complexity.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, this is, there are several ways to do this, and you just tell me which you like and don't like, and I'll just throw out options, because I'm going to take different slices through this idea, right?
Right, let's start with
And-
roots. What are the roots of complexity science?
Okay, Well, okay, so, all right. So I just wrote a whole series of books on this, so it's a very good question for me. So essentially, one way to say this is the roots are the study of machines. Machines that were made, right, in the Industrial Revolution, like steam engines, or machines that evolved, like organisms.
Just to
And in the 19th
clarify, you're not referring to the 5 basic machines of physics here.
No.
You're referring to industrial machines that we have made,
Manufactured.
manufactured
Yeah.
in our civilization.
Exactly, like the steam engine, like the centrifugal governor, or like an organism. So, exactly. So, mechanisms in the natural world that do work of one kind or another.
Gotcha.
And, right, so sometimes we call that problem-solving matter, in contrast to the regular matter that's studied by physicists and chemists.
I
So,
like
you know,
that
you don't look at the
distinction. Yeah, because
Right?
in physics class, there's a frictionless pulley pulling a mass on an inclined plane.
Right.
We're not thinking that has consciousness or anything else.
No.
It's not doing anything interesting other than fitting into my problem set.
Right.
Right. So yeah, I like that distinction. Continue, please.
Right. So okay, so that's one way to go. Right. So problem solving matter versus regular. And then there's a whole bunch of questions. In fact, you just did it, that feel very natural when you talk about problem solving matter. Like, for example, how efficient is it? How did it originate? How does it adapt? Right? How smart is it? How does it store information? How does it evolve? How does it fail? Right? And how eventually does it go extinct? And some of those questions are shared with physics. Many of them are not. It's not really meaningful to say how smart is the moon. I mean, some people probably do, but we tend to ignore those people, right? And so, but it's totally natural to say, how much information does an economy store, right? How does a society of insects compute? So in a way, you can define it by the questions that feel natural for it. And all of those are natural to all the scales we study.
I like that because when you have that awareness, it means you're not going to force a square peg into a round hole if you're looking at a different system. Just because certain questions and solutions work with one system of machines doesn't mean it'll work for all of them. And so if you keep your interactions native to the phenomenon, you're surely likely to get deeper into what's going on for it. Is that a fair
Exactly.
characterization of what you just said?
No, no, that's exactly right. And I think what happens, and this happened to history of physics, is that the domain, what we would call like the ontology, the reality, requests from us a certain methodology or set of approaches, what we call epistemology. And so the physical world loves principles of symmetry, right, which we encode in various principles in physics, typically conservation laws, right? In complex systems, we like broken symmetries and noise, irregularities that get fixed, that sometimes we call frozen accidents. And that needs a different kind of theory. And a lot of SFI is about finding the theory for the messier domain that lives between order and chaos.
So this is chaos theory. So you're looking for patterns out of chaos theory. But if you take a step back,
But he didn't say it was chaos theory.
Yeah, he didn't.
He said it's in between.
In between.
I did.
Yeah, but you're not the guest.
I know.
No, what he said was it's in between pure chaos and
order.
And there's messy systems that might yield to analysis, as you're saying.
Does chaos actually present with certain regularity of pattern?
Yeah, so actually, I mean, okay, as an aside, I'll get there in a second, a footnote to that. The answer is yes. Neil's right. I mean, chaos theory is a tiny, tiny, tiny part of complexity. Right. And in fact, weirdly enough, it's a part of complexity that fits very naturally in physics. It came out of the study of things like the so-called three-body problem, classical systems, right, that are completely deterministic. There's no noise in chaos. It's deterministic irregularity. So it does present as order that appears superficially to be random. And we're interested in subjects that have that property, but they add real randomness, like thermal randomness, noise to them. So early in our history, because of a book that was written by James Gleick, actually, in 92.
Oh, yeah.
It's called Chaos, right? And it was an important book for SFI because he talked a lot about our work. But it's actually a tiny part of what we do, and it's the part that's very close to physics.
All right.
So it could.
So there.
That no.
Now I know more. I am better educated, so thank you.
Okay, so how about other elements?
I was just going to say, but are you looking in the messiness for reason, or if you want to call it order, if you want to call it non-messiness? So that the messiness itself really isn't messy. We just see it that way. We don't understand it.
Yes. Okay. So, right. So interestingly, so where does this word complexity come from? And it gets exactly to your question. In 1948, Warren Weaver, who was a mathematician, he wanted to classify all of regularity or irregularity in the universe, right? And he said, and we can debate whether this is useful. I find it quite useful. He said there are simple phenomena. That's classical physics. It doesn't mean it's easy to understand, but it's to Neil's earlier point. It's simple. There are beautiful laws, elegant mathematical formalisms that explain it. Then there's the world of what he called disorganized complexity. That's the sort of the study of gases, what we would now study with thermodynamics and statistical mechanics. Irregular things, but have beautiful descriptions. And then in the middle, there's organized complexity. It's not a gas, it's an organism, it's an ant, right? It's a brain, it's a city. And in that space, what we realized really at the end of the 19th century is we don't have good theories for it. We can do irregularity beautifully. We can do simplicity beautifully. And then you move to everything that we actually care about in some sense as human beings and as animals, as living beings, we kind of under-theorized. Beautifully described, beautiful artworks, but what is the kind of mathematics of that zone of organized complexity? And I think you make a really important point, which is that how much order you see is a function of the observer. Oh. And if the observer has more computational power, it's going to see more order, right? So complexity is observer dependent in a very profound way. Rather like quantum mechanics is observer dependent in a very different way.
Wow.
But this has to do with our computational capability, if you like.
I'm going to tell you the truth right now. I'm just going to come out and say it.
Bueno, esto que acaba de decir es súper potente, ¿eh? Es decir, que dependiendo del observador, su capacidad de computación, vemos una complejidad u otra, ¿no? Muy relacionado con el mundo de la inteligencia artificial, ¿eh?
I actually thought when we started that this was going to be bullshit. but he is making some great points here.
That's why he's on.
That's why we got the man.
That's why he's here.
That's why we got the man.
So when you look for adaptive functions,
show,
is that the sort of pattern that you're looking for, how it's reacted to, for want of a better term, environmental circumstances?
Definitely. I mean, I think, you know, one of the challenges, right, is going from, and I think you've had some of my friends on that show who talk about this. I mean, maybe Sean and maybe
Yeah, we had
Sarah.
Sean Carroll. Yes,
Right,
he's a friend of the show.
Yeah, and so that's a good example. So you go from, you know, what's the difference between a ball rolling down a hill, right? So it's minimizing some function, and an organism adapting. And that distinction, to this day, people debate, is there adaptation in physics? You know, maximizing some function or minimizing some function? Or is it unique to the living state? And so for us, agency, the agent, you know, it could be an organism, could be a machine, actually, it could be an AI, has some characteristics that a ball rolling down a hill do not have, that we need a new theory for. And we can talk about what that new theory looks like.
Right.
But adaptation is absolutely central to complexity, because without it, there isn't any.
I will tell you this much. An AI rolling down the hill is a hell of a lot more expensive
Than a ball rolling down a hill.
You have lost a lot of money other than that ball.
All right, so this approach seems potent enough so that it does not need to be constrained to any one discipline. And I'm impressed to see efforts to apply this to society, economic systems, civilization itself.
Yeah.
So do you have enough confidence in your modeling and its foundations to then go into something that's way more complex than basic physics, because you're now involving human behavior?
Yes. In other words, can you solve stupidity? Because we are living in a very high time of stupidity.
Well, that's actually, that's my area of interest. So I can't solve it, but I can diagnose it. And so, but we can talk about what it means. Let me just address both. I feel this question, I don't know, is the real honest answer to this question. I think that something interesting happens that's sometimes surprising. And this is very familiar from other sciences, right? If you try to understand an individual particle floating about, it's really hard. You know, its trajectory is essentially random. But you have enough particles and you average, and order emerges, right? So for example, a fluid will flow. And so we have equations of fluids that look at things like viscosity and average density that don't worry about the individual particles and all their peculiarities. And in just the same way, humans that are fundamentally, I think, unpredictable, I mean, there are things we do that are predictable, alas, but in aggregate, there are predictable regularities in societies, and economists and psychologists and sociologists exploit those facts. So if you aggregate right, then a regularity and a pattern can emerge again. And I think the big question for us is a city, is a civilization one of those things that actually shows emergent regularity, which will give us some handle on them that we might be able to control?
This is not a pushback, but I need some clarification here. Because when you talk about a city and you talk about, let's just say the aggregate of a group, okay? All right?
People.
People. Thank you. When you talk about people, all right, a neuroscientist will tell you that we are predictable enough that if given enough data on the person, I can tell you exactly what they're going to do. And if given enough...
advertisers know that.
Yeah, advertisers.
You don't need neuroscience.
We don't even need neuroscientists, right.
Yeah.
And if given enough data on a group, I can tell you exactly how to manipulate them for them to become violent, for them to become docile, for them to become agitated. So where is the emergence in that? Because
we haven't talked about emergence yet.
Oh, okay. Well, you're right. Okay.
Okay.
But
it's still a great
I
question.
felt like he was moving towards emergence with that.
No,
with
but
what he just said.
But the bridge there is he's brilliantly analogizing the fact that you have gas fluid particles.
I agree with that.
Individually, you know, there's no flow law
Yeah,
for individual
you're not worried
particles.
about the particle, but
Right.
when they come together, they actually present these properties that make them as a whole act differently.
And you basically just said what he said, that in aggregate, we behave in ways that may be predictable and be describable analytically.
Yes, but here's the difference. As human beings, that's due to the fact that each one of us has to be in a very particular place for that to happen. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
I bet.
unlike particles, all the particles is going to do the same thing. All of them, all the time.
All right, David,
That's my
question
point.
for you. If you go back to the reference point of cities, does it
Yes.
change for an unplanned to a planned city where the predictability is as same or very different?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, good question. I mean, I think that for the things that we study, not so much, interestingly. Okay, I want to thread these points.
All right,
all of
good.
them, because they're all really good and they're actually getting at the heart of why this is difficult. So the first point about, yes, humans are not like little, Brownian motion particles. We have histories, we have desires, we have beliefs, right? And so we're heterogeneous in a way that particles are not. That is absolutely right. It's what makes
And that's
the
really
process
all
difficult.
Chuck was
That's what I'm saying.
trying to say.
Yes, that's Chuck's
Correct.
point.
Sorry
And I
for
think
taking
that's
so long to
completely-
get there.
No, but I think that is really important, right? And I think, and yet, right, if I half the price of the groceries, you're going to go out and buy more of them because you're fearful that the price will go up again next week. But you see what I mean? There are regular patterns of behavior despite all of that heterogeneity, which is important in our lives. And so the question is, at what scale? So now let's go to cities, right? It turns out actually that cities are so constraining of the supply of energy and the supply of resources and the interactions between people and neighborhoods, that there are emergent regularities that come out of those constraints. So for example, if you look at the growth of GDP as a city gets larger, it follows a universal law that looks like it's a law of physics. You get a scaling of GDP that goes as essentially the population size to the 1.15 power. So whatever. But the point is that weirdly enough, when you impose these strong constraints on society, they start looking more like physical systems. They have emergent regularities.
Oh man, that's great.
And as you remove those constraints, right, then of course many of these systems, these kind of theories fail.
So let's blow open the topic now then of emergence.
Yeah.
Because that's a topic of great fascination, especially in biology. But to the extent that can apply to other systems, that would be amazing to get some insight into what's going on the frontier where we don't understand what's going on.
And just because you and Neil and Gary probably too, because he did all the research on this, can you please define emergence? Because I hear people use the term, and I think a lot of times they're not using it correctly. So can you please just tell us, what is emergence?
That's a completely fair observation. I spend most of my life, in horror. Okay. First of all, I want to say it's a difficult concept, and I think it would be completely accurate to say that we still have huge amounts of work to do to understand formally what it means. But I'm now going to, having said all that little caveat, I'll tell you what I think it is. So let's just start with physics, because it's easy. So we just talked about it. We talked about gases, like the kinetic theory of gases. Put loads of those particles together, right? And you can get solids at the right temperatures and pressures, and you can get fluids. And it turns out that the mathematical equations you use to describe those two systems are different, right? And the dimension, the simplicity, if you like, the number of terms in those equations are different. And so we like fluid dynamics because it's actually quite a elegant way of describing the behavior of loads and loads of particles in a particular temperature and pressure. That is emergence. The fact that you have two things, a new state of matter with properties that wouldn't really seem to apply at the individual particle level, and it has a new language of description, and a new language of prediction. Those are the two hallmarks. Now, it's interesting you were talking about psychology, advertising, and neuroscience. And that's a beautiful example. So let's imagine, right, that in order to be a really good psychologist or marketer, you had to be a great neuroscientist. Of course, a really good marketer doesn't need to be a good neuroscientist, because all of that detail is a little bit like a particle in a gas relative to a fluid. A good marketer is doing something like fluid dynamics by analogy. They're understanding collective properties that have their own language, right? And I think a lot of kind of pseudoscience, to be honest, is where a level that has its own perfectly adequate language starts using the more reductionist language to give it legitimacy. So emergence, 1, new states or phases of matter or organization. 2, new languages and descriptions, typically mathematical, it doesn't have to be, right? And 3, the tricky one is not everything deserves to be called emergent. And so finding that emergent level is actually part of the challenge. And a lot of, we would argue, a lot of economic theory would be better off being replaced by psychology, because the language it's derived or invented doesn't really work. It's not like fluid dynamics. So the failures of emergence are also really interesting.
So when you get to the state of emergence, what is the prediction accuracy for you being able to say this is most likely going to be happening here?
Yeah, that's actually the criterion, right? That, if you'll allow me, I'm going to use another analogy that helps. Okay. So let's say that I'm proving a mathematical theorem, okay? The way that works, you write down your axioms, right? Your assumptions, you put down your equations, and then you have a bunch of, a kind of a toolkit for doing deduction. You apply calculus or group theory, whatever you like. And out pops an answer, right? And the correctness of that answer has nothing to do with your psychological state, nothing to do with what you have for breakfast in the morning, nothing to do with the economy, but nothing to do with neurons. It has to do with the formal logic of mathematics. And that's the most beautiful example of emergence for me, because you wouldn't gain additional insight into the correctness of a proof by knowing what the neurons were doing. They're irrelevant. And the technical term for that is screened off. Truly emergent phenomena screen off microscopic degrees of freedom. That's some fancy language. And we know it's true, right? But we know it's true of mathematics. It's probably the best example, I think, of a truly emergent language. And because, to your point, it does predict, it does deduce. You do get to the right answer, right? You don't have to go down.
So I'm curious about something here. So when we look at flocking birds,
yeah,
that is a macroscopic group behavior where, as far as I understand it, you cannot, there's no known way to analyze a single bird in any way that will tell you that in the company of other birds it will flock. And I've always thought of emergence as just such a system. And you hinted to that with the gas particle and the gas as a fluid or as a solid or as a gas. Well, yeah.
Depending on temperature and pressure.
Sorry, the molecule, as a solid, liquid, or gas. So would you agree that these other kinds of systems, you can't look at a termite and say, one day it will build a termite mound? Is it because we don't know enough about it? Do we need to be more reductive or less reductive in our analysis of the organism to know what it would do macroscopically in a group?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Okay. So I think sometimes that and sometimes the opposite. So let me give you an example.
So you're right. He's right.
No, it's really interesting because let's say it's sort of interesting, right? If you said, I know everything about the neuroscience of an ant, right? Or a termite or a starling, you know?
Yep.
I know about fluid dynamics, hydrodynamics, I know what feathers do, I know how far they can see, you know, all of that. So I could predict, if I put a bunch of them together, how they would behave. And I think that there are going to be cases where that is true. But that doesn't mean emergence isn't still useful. Because you might say, yes, I can. I needed deep thought, the computer from, you know, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right, to work it out. And it took the lifetime of the universe to do so. But I could do it, as opposed to, you know what, Neil, I've got a pencil and paper here. I'm going to write down my little emergent theory, and I'm going to do it in 5 seconds. And so there is a side to emergence, which is just about efficiency.
Yeah.
Efficiency.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going to see an equation on a T-shirt sometime soon.
We have many of those. Unfortunately, we have too many of those. That's part of the problem.
Equations, right.
All right, well, I mean, Chuck mentioned AI earlier on, and we don't want to roll it down the hill because it's too expensive.
Absolutely.
Can you predict the emergence of consciousness in something like an AI?
Wow.
Or define the complexity of life itself in this
I
context.
want to go even deeper. Fair enough.
I mean, why not?
Well, yeah.
We're there.
I mean, honestly, and wouldn't that kind of be the same? Because if an AI it really does have emergent consciousness and truly emergent intelligence,
Then it's life.
then it really is us at that point. It's just us at that point.
Or is it?
No, it's us in a different form.
Well, let's find out.
Okay, let's find out.
I might annoy you now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the first thing I would say is that AIs have no intelligence.
Right.
Okay. And then we'll discuss what that means. But they have tons of capability. And I tell you the difference. Here's my thought experiment. I was asked these kind of zealots of the technocratic era, which is the following. You have two students, okay? And let's call them A and B. And you set them the same exam. It's just a general knowledge quiz, right? And they come back, we'll get all the answers right, all right? And I said to you, which is the better student? You say, I don't know, they got the same answer. Now I say to you, A did the exam in the library, where every time a question came up, they looked up the answer. And B actually took the exam, I don't know, by the side of the ocean, And you say, well, clearly B is the better student. Now, the problem is, so knowledgeable, we know the difference between fake knowledgeable and real knowledgeable because we can ask, did you do it in a library or not? And the problem with a lot of AI at the moment is it's basically fake intelligent as far as I'm concerned.
It's a very quick lookup. It's really just...
It's very quick, essentially a really clever lookup. It's a plus, and I'm not saying it's not an amazing technology.
Bueno, esto es cierto para algunos modelos, pero para otros no, y vamos, hay decenas de investigaciones al respecto en los que esto no es correcto, lo que estoy diciendo.
I'm just saying, but it's a very capable technology. If you ask, and again, now we get to intelligence, kind of my field, what is intelligence? Intelligence is basically someone or something that makes a hard problem easy. If you went to school and you're sitting down trying to work out a problem, you look over at the person next to you, and they've made a problem look effortless, you'd say, oh my God, that's pretty intelligent.
No.
If that person
You're the intelligent one looking over the shoulder
Right.
because you got the answer easier than they did.
Yeah.
that's true.
Right.
That's like a strategic intelligence.
If I may echo your story with an example I give often,
Yes.
where let's say I'm an architect and I'm going to hire a summer intern, and they're both the same on paper,
Right.
And so therefore they get to come in for an interview, right? And I want to pick one from the interview.
Okay.
And this is a contrived example, but I think you'll agree, David, that there's a church steeple outside my window, and I say, just for grins, how tall is that church steeple? And the person says, oh, it's 135 feet. I will say, well, how do you know? Well, I memorized all the church steeple heights. It's a thing I do. The other person says, I don't know. I'll be right back. It goes away for 10 minutes, then comes back and says, somewhere between 130 and 140 feet. I said, well, how did you find out? He said, well, I know how tall I am, and I measured my shadow. Then I measured the shadow of the church steeple, and then I did some simple math to get this answer. Who are you going to hire?
I'm actually going to hire the second guy.
The second one.
Because clearly what he was able to do was problem
I didn't
solve.
say he or she, but that's okay.
I said he. I'm
Yes.
sorry. Because I apologize. Because they were able to.
Good save.
Because
He's saved.
were able to problem solve.
To problem solve. And is my example resonate with you here?
Yeah, very much so. And I think you can see where, notice, right, that in the era of the Turing test, the imitation game, you just ask how high is the steeple. And if it gives you the right answer, you say, look, there you go. It's indistinguishable from another human being. But you then went a bit further and asked for an explanation, right? Tell me how you arrived at that answer. Prove to me you understand. And I think these ideas of it, understanding and explanation, are really important to intelligence.
Ya, hace poco publicamos sobre lo que está diciendo de la explicación, autoexplicación, diferentes papers al respecto. Están los sesgos y eso que hablan tanto de la transversalidad del conocimiento son tremendos, pero no será mi labor. Quizás sí iluminar, pero el que cada cual investigue en la dirección que crea. Yo ya os digo que todo esto que está comentando ahora mismo sobre la interpretación de ese modelo que es inteligente, que están haciendo la analogía entre inteligencia y sabiduría, vamos, está fuera de lo que es la realidad actual, tanto incluso de los propios LLMs o LRMs.
Discussed in place of what Alan Turing did, and he's my compatriot, I love him, but the idea of the Turing test did a lot of harm because it allows for this possibility essentially of cheating.
I had not thought about it that way, but you've just convinced me. Because that's the litmus test that has always been applied.
Right.
And then everyone is left thinking there's intelligence on the other side.
Right.
But David just unpacked that into and lays it bare for what it is.
However, in defense of Turing, I think it was just the wrong terminology because basically the idea was you wouldn't know the difference. That was the test. You would not know the difference.
Correct.
So he's not necessarily saying that they're the same. He's just saying that one is represented in a way that is indistinguishable from the other.
Unless you went further and said, how did you figure this out?
Well, now you just screwed him.
David, you spoke about your research into intelligence in the universe. On Aeon, you published an essay, Problem Solving Matter, September 2024. Aeon. Yes, it's a journal.
Yeah, either way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And you suggest that life is less chemistry and physics, more like a computational process that is born out of our need to be
Software.
problem solvers. You're going to need to...
Shots fired there.
No. You're going to need to do a little bit more unpacking there because that's got people thinking. Now I've even just said that.
You can only say that when there's not a biologist within a mile of him that he can say that.
I think David has the capability to answer this.
You'd think, all right, go for it.
So in that paper with my co-author Christopher Kempes, we address this question of problem-solving matter transcends its materials, which is essentially that question, right? But let me give you, here's the thought experiment, and it's extraterrestrial, you're going to like it, which is, so you imagine some extraterrestrial being visits the Earth, and they want to know what a computing device are, right, or is. And they arrive on the Earth at the time of the Jacquard loom, which was like a first essentially digital computer. And they say, our digital computer is something made out of wood, out of silk, right? And, right, okay, and it's, all right. And then 50 years pass, right? With a foot pedal, right, exactly, right? And it's used to make beautiful items of clothing. That's what I give you, right, okay. So, 50 years pass, they come back again, maybe a bit more, 75 years. And they say, what is a computer? It's this thing with these giant vacuum tubes, right? Thermionic valves, and they're made out of quartz and they're made out of metal, molybdenum and so on. And another 50 years passes and they come back and say, what's a computer? Actually, no, that's not a computer. It's not something made of wood and silk. It's not something made out of glass and tungsten or whatever you want. It's something made out of metal oxides and it's based on transistors. And what you realize is, computing isn't about the material, it's about the logic. They all implement a logic. Now, they implement, as it happens, binary logic, Boolean logic, right? And we know that if you have enough transistors and you put them together, you can do computations. So this is actually another thing that came from Turing that he got completely right, is that it's not the material, it's the logic, and you need the material that can instantiate the logic. So not any material will do. Unfortunately, the history of the study of the origin of life has been obsessed with the material because we're made of material and we're the only example we know. And so you look at the materials that we're made out of, or all life, and you kind of reach this weirdo conclusion that that's the only way it could be done.
That's clever and insightful. What that also does is it misleads us into projecting what things might be like in the future. So for example, in 2001: A Space Odyssey, that was 1968, and they're imagining the year 2001.
Right.
Okay, that's the whole point of the movie. So in 1968, computers were like big, and in 2001, the computer was even bigger.
Right.
Okay, and it was even more centralized, and no one is thinking that we'd all have computers in our pocket. So they're thinking that it's the material, now just get more of that to make that happen.
Exactly.
So it completely distorts how you might be thinking about the future, unless you take David's sensibility to task here.
True. In addition, could we then think that the materials are us, and then seek to replicate not a silicon version of ourselves, but an actual biological merger of the AI and what causes us to have true intelligence.
Again, I mean, two things there. So one is just a lot of the things and concepts that we've been wrestling with, even, consciousness that you asked about, life, intelligence, in their early phases of development, get mapped onto a machine or mechanism or matter that's familiar to us. And there's a good reason. I mean, that's nothing wrong with that. It makes perfect sense. You've got to start somewhere.
Right.
And then as our ideas evolve, they become in some sense more abstract. And eventually we culminate in a kind of logical description. But the material matters, right? And so to your point, it's really interesting. I mean, and this is an unknown question. There are people out there and they call themselves functionalists. And Turing was one. And he wrote this beautiful essay where he said, I mean, he didn't say it this way, but he essentially said, I don't give a shit whether the brain has the consistency of cold porridge. He said, the matter doesn't matter. And, that was his view. But, we don't know if that's
matter
true.
Does matter.
The matter matters. Matter matters, right?
I'm all for mattering.
Right, but does any kind of matter, right?
Okay.
And I think that's sort of the question. And it is an open question whether the kind of sensual existence we experience does depend on the particular kind of matter we're made from. Does our kind of consciousness depend on our kind of matter? I actually think there's a strong claim to be made. The answer is yes. Doesn't mean there couldn't be other kinds of life, right? Other kinds of intelligence.
Right.
But this one depends on our matter.
Well, it's the one that we know for a fact does, because it's us and we're experiencing it. So from an experiential frame of reference, we understand it. So my point is, why wouldn't we just look for exactly how we become conscious and intelligent in our formation? And then if it truly isn't something that just happens because all of these disparate things come together, then we might be able to take that and graft it onto a machine of our making.
Well, you could argue that that's exactly what's just happened.
Uh-oh.
So if you look, if you look at the history of AI, 30 years ago, it now gets called GoFi, good old-fashioned AI. And it was all about, we're going to build a computer that can play chess using symbolic logic, checkers. We're going to build expert systems that we're going to inform with human understanding. And then this big shift took place in neural networks. And they said, you know what? We're not going to start top down. We're going to start bottom up. And we're going to start bottom up with a system that resembles a brain. And it's exactly, so they did exactly what you just said. They'll say, let's just try and rebuild something that looks a bit like a brain with lots of units that are kind of like neurons, that are connected kind of like neurons. You have enough of them, they'll do something interesting. So I would argue that this kind of biomimesis approach to intelligence that you're describing is the AI revolution of the current moment.
Okay.
All right, but I got to get to the bottom of something here. Let's bring back emergence into the conversation. We have neurons that ostensibly are nicely suited for our survival. Okay, when we're hungry, we look for food. If there's danger, we escape it or fight it. And so the brain is doing its thing. And any creature has any creature that cares about
similar
living,
functionality in their brain.
In their brain. But we want to say that we have consciousness as something beyond what we might ascribe to a plant. So what is going on inside of us, either in complexity or from bottom up or top down, that you can call consciousness? And the reason why I ask that in that way is everyone is making a big deal of consciousness today. And the fact that people are still writing books about it is evidence to me that we still don't know what it is. Because if we knew what it was, the last book would have been written and there'd be no further books on the shelf. So, but everyone's talking about it like we fully understand it. And so can you give me some access to consciousness given your tools that you have built to ask questions?
Yeah, I share your skepticism. I think a lot of this is just baloney, the consciousness stuff, to be honest. And I think we really don't understand it. And hence, more and more terrible books being written on the topic.
Well, I think this is a good time for me to announce my forthcoming book, the last book on consciousness.
There are, well, you know this, there are just many schools of thought here. And in my world, most of the rigorous work, and I'm not saying it's great work, I'm just saying it's rigorous work, is looking for quantifiable metrics, measurements that correlate with the conscious state. So let me make that clear. So I measure.
Claro, pero eso no tiene nada que ver con la conciencia. Es que esta gente, si esta gente lo hace a este nivel, imaginaros el resto, ¿no? ¿Qué tiene que ver? Ahora lo lleva la conciencia y un estado medible. Bueno.
Measure your brain, right? I write down some equations, I calculate some number, and I measure your brain when you're sleeping, I measure your brain when you're awake and solving a problem, and I measure your brain under anesthesia. And it turns out that that number that I calculated, I say, wow, look at that. That number's high when you're waking and solving a problem, and it's near zero when you're under anesthesia or sleeping. And so this is sometimes called the neural correlates approach to consciousness. It doesn't tell you what it is. It just says that there's some formalism that allows you to
found a correlation.
Right.
You found a correlation, right? And maybe that's useful, right? If you go under anesthesia and you're going to have your big toe removed, I'd rather that thing was near zero than at its maximum. So, but that's sort of the best of it. When it comes to actually theories of what it is, honestly, qualitatively, it seems to be something about the tiny little attention window that the human brain has to operate on large sets of data. And just to be explicit about this, every mathematician knows that every hard problem is solved by their unconscious mind. Right? There is a very famous book written on this by someone called Hadamard, and it's called The Mathematician's Mind. And he interviewed everyone, interviewed Einstein, Poincaré, looked at the journals of Gauss, and they all say the same thing. They say, it's a really hard problem. The best thing I can do is think about it and then stop thinking about it. I have a nice meal, I go for a run, or whatever you do, and then somehow through some epiphany, the solution presents itself to me.
I'm pretty sure Einstein didn't go on runs. I'm just pretty sure about that.
Yeah. He played the violin.
I don't think he was a fitness guru.
He smoked his pipe. He did something in place of going for a run.
Played his violin even, yeah, sure.
He played his violin. He went walking with Kurt Gödel. He did his thing. But the interesting point there is that, so consciousness is not about solving the hard problem. It's about that little window of attention that is focused on some part of the problem. And most of the current formalisms don't really give us much of an insight into how that might work. So I actually do not like a lot of this stuff, to be honest.
So in the I didn't read the book, but I saw the film I, Robot, which is based on the story by Isaac Asimov.
Mm-hmm. The Will Smith one?
Yeah.
Well, the Isaac Asimov one. But yes, Will Smith. Okay. Yes, the Will Smith story.
Yes, the Will Smith story.
So the robots, all humanoid robots, there are these large vans that have robots that are decommissioned or that, but they're still kind of alive, but they just have no purpose until they're programmed for their utility, to be your partner, to be your whatever. And in the van, the robots grouped with each other. They weren't just maximizing their distance, and their pattern was not random. And someone asked about that. What do you know about this? And they said, we don't know what's causing this. What we do know is that there's a lot of residual programming that was never fully cleared out when we added new utility to these things. And this is exactly evolution, okay? There's leftover stuff in us from a time that we don't need it anymore. Right. So what the hell is it doing in our head?
It's the reason why sometimes I feel the need to eat flies.
That explains a lot.
It's my reptilian brain.
Your gecko brain.
Yeah, exactly. Just going crazy.
So I was intrigued that it was the leftover programming that was not refreshed in the continued evolution of humans, or in the case of those robots, the continued layering on to the functionality of them. And there's legacy software that you don't know what it's doing. So that was, I was intrigued by that. I just want to share with you that observation.
Yeah. I mean, again, a lot to talk about. And I think, actually my colleague here, who you probably all know, who recently passed away, Cormac McCarthy, the novelist, he wrote a beautiful essay on this that he called the Kekule problem, which is about this moment of insight. And this was the discovery by Kekule of the benzene ring. They say, he saw it in a dream. And Cormac was fascinated as a writer, as a novelist, with this question of where is this coming from? I'm sitting down to write a book, and somehow my brain is instructing my hand that I couldn't tell you exactly what's going to happen at the end of that sentence. It's sort of coming out. And so he, over the course of time, introspectively came to believe that he was getting these instructions from his unconscious mind. Now, I'm not in a mystical sense, just he wasn't working it out, right? And to your point, if you look at the history of life on Earth, most of evolution, up until very recently, took place without language, right? And presumably, most organisms being run by a set of automatic programs of the kind that you just described in the van with the robots huddling, like starlings. And that we superimposed above that this kind of very thin layer of abstraction and self-awareness. But most of the computation is not being done by that thin layer. And so
that's very
what is true, right, is that little thin layer gives us one thing that we're not aware any other animal can do.
Yeah.
Which means that we can communicate our understanding. They can communicate other things, but we can communicate our understanding. I can give you Newton's laws. I can tell you about Darwin's theory of evolution, right? And that superpower of humans that comes from very few neurons, I imagine, right, sits on top of exactly all of that programming that evolution gave us over the course of hundreds of millions of years.
So I got one last question for you.
But I've still got more. But you asked
we're
asking more questions. I'll sit and talk to myself then.
we're in rap mode. We're in rap, not the MC.
No, I know
kind
what
of
mode
rap
you
mode.
mean, yeah.
We're in rap mode here. So I just have to go there because it fascinates us all. Well, I think about it all the time. I can't speak for others. Can you estimate, based on your toolkit, how intelligent we are relative to how high intelligence can get in the universe? So are we smart enough to figure out how the universe works? Or are we just complete idiots and some higher alien is just going to come out and just look at us like we are earthworms in our capacity to deduce the nature of the world?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, one of the areas I work on is on tools and artifacts. The abacus, the sextant, the quadrant, the Rubik's Cube. Yeah, all that good stuff.
Here comes the shelf.
Got my sextant here, and I've got 3 Rubik's Cubes up on the other shelf. Just show and tell.
And I'm sitting on the abacus.
I hope not. I mean, there's an important point in that, because human intelligence has always been about ingenious outsourcing to artifacts and tools, including mathematics, right? You could not calculate the orbit of a planet without conic sections or the calculus, right? And I think human intelligence in that respect is unlimited, because we'll just continue to build tools that are kind of adjuncts to our capabilities. And what makes AI interesting...
I just want you to know that I can compute orbits with this abacus.
Nice. No, I love it.
No, I'm lying. I'm totally lying right there. Yeah, this is an authentic Chinese abacus.
Yeah, I can see. I can see that. But I think, so just to your point, I think that what's really, I'll just tell you very quickly. I classify tools into 2 categories. One I call complementary cognitive artifacts. That's like a pencil or an abacus or a sextant. And there's another kind of tool that I call a competitive cognitive artifact, and that's like a GPS machine or a large language model, right? One of those sets, the complementary ones, makes you smarter. One of those sets makes you dumber. Okay, and I think it's the choice of humanity to decide what kind of tool it wants to be dependent on. And so my fear now is we're outsourcing our capabilities to competitive artifacts and not to things like future abaci, which actually would make us smarter.
Wow.
Do I have time for my question?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, I'm asking it anyway.
Go ahead, ask it. Come
All
on.
right.
All right.
So,
Let the man ask
David,
his question.
you said life is problem solving. So why has the universe created life, and what is the problem it's trying to solve?
Ooh.
So I can tell you the horribly
Muy
cynical
buena
answer to that
pregunta.
question.
Go on.
Yes, please.
This horribly cynical answer to that question is that life is the most efficient way of returning to thermodynamic equilibrium.
Oh, man, that's terrible.
Because life is the most efficient generator of entropy.
Right.
And if you think about what we do when we build factories, and what we're essentially doing is we're turning ordered states into disordered states. And that the cynical answer to your question really is life is a kind of suicide by the universe.
Yeah, I was about to say what you really just said is it's all for nothing. But that's not true either, because it's what we make it.
Is there an answer that isn't
yeah.
cynical, just so as we can have it on such a
okay.
downbeat?
No, I
like the cynical answer. I love it.
And I think the non-cynical answer came from the sort of idealist philosophers, and they said life was the universe's way of knowing itself. And that's also true. So that's the non-cynical version.
Yeah.
All right.
That's very poetic.
Yes.
I like
yes.
that.
That was Cosmos 1980.
Okay.
That was a major theme. Life is a way for the universe to know itself. Yeah. Yeah. All right. We got it. We kind of have to end it.
Time's
here.
up.
Right.
But we could have gone on 3 more hours.
Yes.
Clearly.
Yes.
Clearly. Well, we're delighted to first meet you and to
Nice to
hear
meet
what
you.
you're into. And I'm glad as president of the Institute, you get to still do work in your favorite topic.
Yeah, but the question is, are you glad?
I am glad. You can't do this job unless you also do science.
Yes, good. That's as it should be, and often how it's not. Yes.
Absolutely.
So, David, thank you for joining us here on Star Talk.
Thank you so much for having me. And these horribly dark times, so I appreciate the fact that we get to talk about intelligent things in a stupid world. I value that.
Thank you for that.
All right, there you go. There you go. All right, Chuck.
It's always
Gary?
a pleasure.
Pleasure, Neil.
Feeling good here.
Yeah.
This has been Star Talk Special Edition, the complexity version of our special edition. Neil deGrasse Tyson here, as always, bidding you to keep looking up.
Bueno, me ha gustado mucho. Me ha gustado mucho. Hay cosas en las que no estoy para nada de acuerdo, pero bueno. Vamos a ver lo que han dicho y luego ver el chat. Aquí está Johan Skepper soltando aquí de todo. Venga, voy a... No soltéis... ahora lo comentaré, porque sí, podéis hacer preguntas concretas. Ahora reflexionamos sobre lo que estáis poniendo en el chat, pero es que... Venga. Bueno, han hablado de muchas cosas. No todo lo que dicen estoy de acuerdo, pero para eso estamos mostrando todo tipo de contenido, ¿no? Hablando de la complejidad, hablando de la evolución de la inteligencia, que es la vida, hablando de la entropía social, ¿no? Interesante, ¿no? El conocimiento dividido y que desde el Instituto de David Krakauer en Nuevo México, pues intentan tener una visión holística y no dividida del conocimiento, ¿no? Muy interesante esto de la visualización de la complejidad condicionada por parte del observador con mayor o menor capacidad de computación, ¿no? Han hablado también del agency, de la IA, de en definitiva, de si somos o no somos predecibles. Ya he visto que lo habéis puesto por aquí, pero evidentemente no han hablado de libre albedrío ni de la ontología de la naturaleza, que habían algunos ahí que sí que pueden hablar. Han hablado de la emergencia de la consciencia. Lo que pasa es que aquí han confundido consciencia. Bueno, un despiporre, ya lo hemos comentado, ¿no? Ha hecho una afirmación sobre inteligencia artificial con un gap terrible en cuanto a lo que está sucediendo, generalizando cosas, y yo creo que ahí ha patinado, pero bastante. la visión de que la vida son procesos, bueno, en definitiva casi la analogía de que la vida es software, que la vida, en definitiva, que la lógica trasciende al sustrato. Bueno, la lógica es el software y la materia trasciende a la lógica, que en definitiva es como decir que el hardware trasciende, perdona, lo importante no es la materia, es la lógica, que en definitiva es como decir que lo importante no es el hardware, es el software. Y esto no nos llevaría, como dicen, a un posicionamiento funcionalista. A ver, sí, pero no. Es que es como coger las rebanadas de pan, quedarse con una y no seguir. La verdad es que gasto mucha energía con todo esto, pero que tranquilo, que voy a dedicarle algo de tiempo, que para eso estamos, aunque llevemos casi 2 horas. Pero me ha gustado. Básicamente, yo lo resumiría, el sustrato no importa para el software. Todo el tema de la importancia inspirada, otra vez han vuelto con el tema de la conciencia, los límites de la inteligencia humana, ahí de gras. El uso de las herramientas, ¿no? Diciendo que algunas te vuelven tonta o tonto y otras inteligentes. Entiendo que referencia a la inteligencia artificial. Hay un sesgo importante y hay que hacer un análisis mucho más profundo. Y sobre que la vida es la solución a un problema y que entonces es el problema que soluciona es el equilibrio, la vida lo que genera es la entropía, que la vida en definitiva, desde un punto de vista cínico, es un suicidio del universo y sin ser cínicos, la vida es el universo conociéndose a sí mismo, podría decir que es Dios manifestándose a través del hombre y entenderíamos como una cosa se une con la otra. Cientificistas. Venga, vamos al chat porque no quiero hacerla un poco muy largo. Vamos a ver al principio. Venga. Bueno, un saludo a todos los que estéis por el chat, que hay bastante gente para ser un viernes. Qué impresionante, dice Alex Morato. La inteligencia artificial ya es una realidad palpable y con este ritmo no sería descabellado pensar que llegaremos a crear vida, incluso humanos, desde cero. Yo creo que es algo que tardaremos en ver, pero que está en el imaginario colectivo y es algo que es más que un sueño, se convertirá en una realidad. No sé cuánto tardaremos, pero evidentemente ya deja de ser ciencia ficción, ¿no? Dice, y si nos llaman locos es porque no entienden o no están lo suficientemente abiertos a lo que se viene. Ahí totalmente, porque en definitiva muchas veces cuando debatimos estas cosas la oposición es la piedra o el fuego, es decir, la censura, no la razón, ni el debate, ni el pensamiento crítico o colectivo. Sí, lo de cuestionar, lo de la burbuja es la que tienen algunos en la cabeza, no me refiero a vosotros en el chat. Algunos y algunas que incluso se alegran de los fracasos de la IA, que bueno, es una falacia absoluta, pero bueno. David Pastor, vale, somos predecibles, yo no estoy de acuerdo. Hay una parte predecible y otra que no. ¿De acuerdo? Volvemos otra vez a la teoría de la realidad. Teoría no. A la realidad de la ontología de la realidad, que es no local. Y en definitiva entramos a al no determinismo. No vamos a salir de ahí, podéis decir lo que queráis. Esto de que se comenta, la conciencia es un estado, bueno, un umbral, ese nivel de interacción de los subsistemas hacen llegar al punto crítico donde se manifiesta la conciencia. No. La conciencia es aquello no local, que influye en el local. Aquello que no podemos determinar. Todo el resto formaría parte de otra cosa. Eso no significa que interaccione con... que haya como un sistema que interacciona. Pero yo no identifico ni yo ni mucha línea de pensamiento tanto filosófico como científico con lo que tú comentas. Creo que podemos decir que cuando un sistema complejo alcanza un umbral, no, pero tú estarías hablando de emergencia y la emergencia en la conciencia no tiene sentido, lo vuelvo a decir. Es una propiedad no local. Todos tenemos sesgos. Bueno, hablemos de cosas concretas. Generalizar. Ilya Suskever ya lo dijo, el cerebro es una computadora biológica, no importa el material, el sustrato, sí. Puede haber vida como en la Tierra basada en el carbono, pero también puede haber vida basada en otros componentes de elementos de la tabla periódica en otros lugares donde los parámetros tempera. Se ha cortado ahí. Bueno, sí, entiendo que puede haber vida, dependiendo de lo que llamamos vida, con otras formas, ¿no? El material importa. No, en principio no. Crear vida desde cero, un proceso conocido como abiogénesis, requiere manipular billones de átomos y moléculas, organizarlos en estructuras precisas como proteínas y ADN. No, realmente no conoceríamos solo todo el proceso, solo encender el fuego, por así decirlo. Pero sí, estaría en ese proceso de encender el fuego y construir algo coherente o garantizarlo la inteligencia artificial, como se ha explicado en la primera charla de Eric Nguyen, ¿no? Mi convicción se concentra en que un sustrato orgánico o un sustrato sintético pueden proyectar la vida. ¿Qué es la vida? Bueno, ya lo han comentado aquí. Un software. La vida sería una forma concreta de software que tiene un comportamiento también concreto, unas cualidades o características concretas. Vida inteligente, vida con conciencia, inteligencia, conciencia, vida. Ese es el triunvirato. Otros sistemas pueden ser sistemas vivos con otra organización molecular no basada en el carbono, sí. La vida es una casualidad probabilística, no, ni de coña. Probabilística al infinito de posibilidades de su tiempo-espacio, no. Si tú crees que todo esto es una casualidad, podemos ir a la física, a teoría del constructor de David, y bueno, si rebates o lo llevamos desde ahí, entenderás que la vida tiene un propósito. Si tú crees que es que han tirado 1 millón de piezas de Lego y se ha creado el avión, pues cómpralo. Y bueno, lo de que el universo tiene conciencia como elemento o sistema complejo, eso podríamos entenderlo como la idea de Dios. Podríamos, evidentemente, ponerle ese nombre o ahí habría una división, ¿no?, de lo que es el universo, la simulación, y de lo que es Dios creador, entendiendo no a Dios como un concepto como pudiéramos identificar claramente. Plácido, que yo no he dicho nada de predecibles. David Pastor, no, tú no, David Pastor. No, David no. Ha sido, quien ha dicho lo de predecibles ha sido Ignasi Builes. Ignasi Builes Victoria. ¿Qué he dicho? ¿Que has sido tú? Pues se me habrá ido la pinza. El software, que ha tenido un glitch. Perdona, David. No sé. Bueno, algunos glitch uno tiene en lo local, en el software local, ¿no?, en el videojuego, que no en el jugador, espero. Bueno, yo creo que ha sido un programa interesante. A ver, no me ha gustado el tono de la segunda, aunque me ha divertido y me parece interesante muchas cosas que se han planteado. La primera charla me ha gustado, aunque más contenida, pero plantea muchas cosas muy interesantes. Y en conjunto sí que me parece que se muestran líneas de pensamiento y de trabajo y de desarrollo y de ideas que llegarán a ser realidades, algunas de ellas, otras son más planteamientos, que nos llevan a la conclusión de que lo más importante es que podemos hacer es tener la mente abierta, que tenemos que estar muy abiertos al debate y tener el pensamiento crítico siempre, siempre como condición, ¿no? El cuestionamiento incluso propio, ¿no? Bueno, incluso no, el primero quizá. Yo también lo hago mucho, aunque hay algunas cosas que son invariables, otras que puedo, pero hay cosas que no varían, ¿no?, que tengo muy, muy, muy claras, pero bueno, sí que intento siempre ver muchas posturas y lados, pero ya me hace verlo desde un punto de ver muchas carencias en la forma de... Hoy me han propuesto un debate en Webpositor, no sé si lo voy a aceptar o no, casi que sería como la visión xHUB.AI, la visión más pragmática, pero eso no significa que yo no sea pragmático. Yo soy ingeniero de software y desarrollo software. Entonces, es que una cosa no es incompatible con la otra. Lo que veo es que hay unos reduccionismos y unos nihilismos mentales Lo he dicho yo, David. Ah, bueno, sí, Kepler también lo ha dicho. Y otra persona también lo ha dicho. Una cosa, vamos a acabar solo diciendo lo de esto que me ha dolido un poco sobre lo que la vida es un suicidio del universo. Hay algunas cosas que duelen. Vivimos en un momento de bastante oscuridad, por no decir de mucha oscuridad y poca luz. Y la esperanza es que somos mucho más de lo que vemos. Quien no crea en una trascendencia, en un propósito, quien se crea que todo es una película con el play puesto, pues bueno, se está perdiendo el experimentar la vida de una forma o conciencia más elevada. Esta historia o este momento histórico que estamos viviendo con la emergencia, sí, de la inteligencia artificial de forma transversal en todas las áreas de la sociedad y del ser humano, es algo que debemos de afrontar como reto positivo, como un momento apasionante, y que el miedo no nos tiene que alejar de ese reto. El universo, venga, como nos gustan las frases grandilocuentes, el universo está fine-tuneado para que lo logremos. Entonces el éxito de la humanidad y del ser humano es inevitable. Como han dicho aquí, muy a lo punto omega, en definitiva el final ya está escrito, solo está esperando que nosotros lo escribamos. Y a buenas palabras y grandes palabras, ya sabéis que no tengo abuelas, ni abuelos tampoco, por desgracia, pues entiendo que lo habéis entendido y lo habéis captado. Sé que muchos estaréis en desacuerdo y otros aplaudiendo con la lagrimilla. Bueno, no sé si para tanto, pero yo creo que me entendéis. Gracias por acompañarme, gracias por estar ahí. Si no pasa nada, porque como he vuelto con muchas ganas, la semana que viene está full de programas, es decir, que volvemos al ritmo habitual, pero bueno, yo creo que este sábado y domingo haremos programas de este tipo un poco más conectados a la inteligencia artificial, pero tocando temas que no sean, que no me obliguen a dedicarle más tiempo que el de visionarlos y debatir con vosotros, ¿no? Pero bueno, así que amigos, espero que os haya gustado. Lo dicho, gracias por acompañarme. Nos vemos mañana. Que disfrutéis del viernes, del fin de semana. Seguimos. Un abrazo. A ver. Una última pregunta. A ver. Entonces, Plácido, ¿tú crees que no somos una casualidad virtuosa y probabilística en el seno del universo? Entonces, ¿piensas que hay un creador? No, hay un propósito, ¿vale? Y hay un propósito. Y está muy claro que ya lo hemos explicado. Recuperad los programas de Rafael Monterde. Escribiré Humano X. No sé si me matarán al hacerlo, pero bueno, está dentro del roadmap. Gracias. Te agradecemos todo lo que haces. Pues sí, hay haters, pero casi el 90-99% de la gente aplaude lo que hago, que lo que intento es tampoco que estén de acuerdo conmigo, lo que intento es que señalar o mostrar temas de los que muy poca gente se atreve a hablar, mucho menos relacionarlo con el mundo de la inteligencia artificial o la ciencia o temas serios en el desarrollo del conocimiento del ser humano, etcétera. Y bueno, desde xHUB.AI lo hacemos de forma apasionada, yo también lo hago. Me dejo mucha energía para que todo esto os llegue y podamos entre todos dejar un mundo mejor, un impacto positivo, pero sobre todo también para que vosotros disfrutéis de ese proceso de buscar y encontrar verdad. Un abrazo, amigos, ahora sí, nos despedimos, gracias por acompañarme.